they're used to you reacting, aren't they? It kind of gives them some power, right? You're the one who looks unhinged. But now you're not reacting. They might even sense it as an indifference. And they had nothing a narcissistic person likes less than indifference.
So here's one. It comes on an interesting day when I'm feeling a little unhinged, interestingly, is let's all stop calling ourselves unhinged when we finally react to a narcissistic person. Let's break down why. Something I see happen a lot with survivors, they call themselves unhinged. And they'll say, I snapped. That's what I did, because they were reacting to a narcissistic person. So let's take it this way. Have you ever gone a period of weeks, months, or maybe even some cases years, where you did not react to a narcissistic person's baiting, gaslighting, manipulation, deceit, arrogance, entitlement, and overall antagonistic BS? You did it. You did it for a long time. You didn't go deep. You didn't engage. You went on full-on radical acceptance. You got it, and you didn't get into it with them. This would have been easier if maybe it was like, for example, a family member that you didn't see as often. It's a lot more difficult to do this in the long term with somebody you have daily exposure to, like a spouse or a partner you live with or a colleague you see every day. But let's just say whomever it is, you just didn't go there. You managed to, I am not taking their bait. And then one day, as any human being would, you do go there. Who knows why? Maybe they started going in on something that mattered to you, a belief system or a person. Maybe you were going through other stress independent of the narcissistic person, and where you were worn thin by it all. And maybe what you thought was being unhinged or going there or snapping really wasn't much more than you no longer remaining fully detached, and then you found yourself getting into the pointless tango that is a narcissistic relationship. Over the years, I have had many clients tell me that when they finally did engage, that this was the point when they snapped. They would come into session and say, Doc, I snapped. And I got to tell you, this term snapped actually carries connotations of a person going into a blackout moment of extreme aggression or even violence and acting out. You can think of the TV show with the same name, right? It's usually women who finally take out a typically abusive partner. They snapped. We take snapped to mean that someone went off the charts, agitated, dysregulated, that anyone looking from the outside in would view the so-called snapped person as being completely out of control. Now, sometimes I would have the luxury, and I call it a luxury, that the client would actually have recorded their outburst for me to hear, or some device in the environment ended up recording it. They played the recording for me. And almost every time I'm listening for the snapped, and what I'm hearing is nowhere near a person snapping, but rather a person who merely takes a stand against another person who's simply not listening to them. The client who's telling me that they snapped, would often sound quite calm, focused, maybe a little frustrated in these recordings. Sometimes they were crying a little bit. But in most cases, they were not talking at a loud volume, and even if they were a little loud, the things that they were saying were not out of control. They weren't cursing. They weren't calling the person names. They were often trying to put a point onto something that needed a point being put onto after having ignored it for weeks and months. Now, what was more concerning to me, though, was a person saying that they had snapped, when actually what they were doing was simply communicating. Usually in a way a person would if they were not in a relationship with a narcissistic person. But after a period of just gray or yellow rocking the hell out of a situation, they finally just interacted with the person the narcissistic person, right? That's not snapping. That's an interaction. It's not your problem. I mean, it is your problem, but it's certainly not your fault. If the narcissistic person is not listening to you, that's on them. The problem is that interacting with the narcissistic person so often results in being gaslighted or lied to, or the narcissistic person turning themselves into the victim, that it becomes exhausting and it can further magnify the self-blame. But when people who may just say, enough, I cannot keep doing this gray rock, low contact nonsense while someone in my house is acting like a fool. I gotta say something at some point. And again, that's not snapping. And when people label their own normal reaction to a situation, standing up for yourself, clarifying a point, or just telling someone to step down, that is not snapping. That is self-advocacy. That is making your point. If you label that as snapping, you are gaslighting yourself, portraying yourself as the person who has become unhinged, which is what the narcissistic person has been insinuating. Basically, if anyone steps what they'd consider out of line and doesn't completely agree with them or capitulate to them, or heaven forbid, someone shows real emotion with them and stands up to the narcissistic person will always be there to say, you're so unhinged, you're out of control, there's something wrong with you. When we are in narcissistic relationships, we often hold a lot back. It's a survival skill, right? And we censor ourselves. And there's a point to that, right? We can't always live in escalation. It's exhausting to deal with another person's invalidation of reality 24/7. But it also means that it accumulates in us all these things we want to say, the nonsense we want to push back on. That stuff doesn't just go away. Narcissistic people often hold social control by effectively silencing everyone and not allowing anyone to have an experience, perspective, opinion, or even a reality outside of them. When you do push back, and may not be that you push back on a bad day, you may push back on a good day when you feel stronger or have become more indifferent to them, and you finally say what you need to say, that is not snapping. It's important to keep the lens on why this relationship is so asymmetric, so off kilter. It's not you. It's typically trying to do the impossible, which is to try to maintain a relationship with someone who has no interest in you as anything but a source of supply. Stop gaslighting yourself. When you have a reaction in these relationships, that's not you snapping. That's you having an expectable reaction. And in most people who are experiencing narcissistic relationships, you've gone a long period of time before you have those reactions. There's only so long me or anyone else can say, well, just don't engage, just don't this, just don't do that. These are survival strategies, sure, and they're designed to keep you from the ongoing wrath of the narcissistic person. But I certainly understand we all have limits, and there's a point at which we are going to react and we are going to respond. Reacting and responding does not snapping make.
So imagine you're in bed, you're waking up. Imagine your windows happen to face east. Sun comes up. Do you really ever jump out of bed and say, oh my God, look at that sun. It is rising in the east. I can't believe it. That's crazy. No, you don't. Of course, the sun rises in the east. You can count on it. There's a lot of other things you can count on. You can count on the fact that it's difficult to get a dinner reservation on Valentine's Day. You can count on the fact that in the Northern Hemisphere, it's probably going to be really hot in August. You're not surprised when it's a hot day in August. You're like, it's summer. You're not surprised when you wait till 6 p.m. on Valentine's Day to go out to dinner. You're like, it's Valentine's Day. You're like, oh my gosh, it's hot in August. So why do people get so surprised when a narcissistic person behaves narcissistic? The classic example will be a person who's in a narcissistic relationship with a narcissist, and that narcissist is inappropriate with other people. They're flirty, they're inappropriate on social media, they sort of micro-cheat and always having little coffee things and things like that, always uncomfortable. And then this goes on for years. And one day on a Saturday, you're looking down and you see that your partner has liked a very attractive, sort of scantily clad person's picture. And you're like, I can't believe he liked her picture. Why? Why wouldn't you believe? Why would you be surprised by that? I frankly am often surprised when people do get surprised when a narcissist lies, or a narcissist cheats, or they lack empathy, or they walk around saying, how come everyone's not treating me like a VIP? We see this in the news all the time. I think all of us can think off the top of our head of 5, 10, 15, 20 very famous narcissists, and celebrities, athletes, politicians. And they keep doing really, really ridiculous, entitled, grandiose, arrogant, rageful, poorly regulated things. And for reasons that aren't clear to me, like the news media is like, can you believe he said that again? Yeah, I can. In fact, I'd be willing to set a clock by it. You might be thinking, Doc, why do you care? Why do you care that people get surprised by narcissists? And I'll tell you why. When we get surprised, our sympathetic nervous systems do a little leap up, right? Sometimes surprise can be good. Like, I don't know, we walk up to our front door and maybe there's a bunch of balloons waiting for us or something. It's a bit of a surprise, but no matter what, your sympathetic nervous system acts up and like, woo, look at that. When our sympathetic nervous system acts up, it's an activation and it's usually a sign of something, of change, of threat, of something. And our nervous systems aren't made to always be, boo, like always popping up. And in fact, that constant sympathetic nervous system activation is something that's cited for how long-term and regular stress exposure takes a toll on our health. So when you think about it, and you're in a relationship with a narcissistic person, and this can be a family relationship, intimate relationship, work relationship, any relationship, and you keep getting surprised and saying, oh my God, I'm so mad. I can't believe that happened again. I can't believe she said that. I can't believe he did that. It's like the people who year over year over year are surprised at Thanksgiving when someone behaves badly, who year over year are surprised that the same family member ruins the holidays. And they get surprised and they get upset. And sometimes they get really agitated. And it's not good for you. Any more than it would be good for you to jump out of bed and say, to hell with this, I can't believe that sun is rising in the east. I've had it. I can't have this anymore. It's not going to change. And for many narcissists, a lot of their behavioral patterns, especially the really difficult ones, the unempathic stuff, the entitled stuff, the chronic validation seeking, the inability to regulate themselves in the face of negative emotions, those kinds of situations are going to happen all the time. So when the narcissist swears to you, I am not going to be late this time. I will definitely not be late. I promise you I won't be late. And they stroll in late. Instead of saying, I can't believe it. I can't believe you were late. How can this be? Instead of that, sympathetic nervous system getting jazzed up, you shrug. And you know this is how it's going to be. You get kind of an added bonus when you don't get surprised. Because here's where it gets interesting. Narcissistic people really thrive when there's sort of strong negative emotion in the room. They're really good fighters. And in fact, when you get agitated about something and upset, I can't believe it, that's often when they start the gaslighting. Oh my gosh, you're overreacting. You're being too sensitive. Why are you being like this? And now, you reacting to something that's wrong or unjust or inappropriate is turned into you being labeled as a disturbed, crazy person. It doesn't feel good, does it? So the fact of the matter is that getting mastery of the consistency of narcissistic behavior is actually one of the best tools you can learn and practice. Because when you stop being surprised, he's late again, expected it, you might actually be able to compensate for it in a way ahead of time. You know they're always going to be late to dinner? Make sure you eat a little bit something so everyone's not starving to death. You know they're not going to show up? Let the waiter know ahead of time that probably the next person in the party isn't going to come. You know they're not going to come to your kid's soccer game? Let your kid know, you know what, I'm not so sure that mom or dad's going to come, but I'm here. And if they do come, well, great. You prepare the people in the room so that the whole evening or day or opportunity doesn't get wrecked. The added benefit of you being in mastery of this surprise reaction not only means you feel healthier, but also it messes with the narcissist a little bit. They're used to you reacting, aren't they? It kind of gives them some power, right? You're the one who looks unhinged. But now you're not reacting. They might even sense it as an indifference. And they had nothing a narcissistic person likes less than indifference. Because your indifference means A, they're not getting as much narcissistic supply, and B, it means that you might be pulling away a little bit, which definitely triggers their insecurity. It can actually really clean up the power imbalance of a relationship with a narcissist when you don't get worked up as much. It can be really hard to do because obviously these things may be bothering you. Listen, if you have east-facing windows, you also may be bothered by the fact that the damn sun blows into your window every morning and wakes you up. You bought the house. It faces east. I'm telling you to do the equivalent of get better drapes, get better shades on your windows. These things may bother you, and find other places to talk about them. It might be in therapy, it might be with friends, it might be in support groups. But radical acceptance means that you recognize this is how it is, you change your expectations, and you do not give the narcissist the satisfaction of your surprised reaction, but more importantly, you don't put your poor psyche, body, and stress response system through the headache of constantly having these nervous system upticks that come from being surprised. Listen, surprises are great. There's nothing lovelier than getting a present from someone and not knowing what it is, from finding out that you left 20 bucks in a pair of jeans that you're pulling out of the washer. Those are good surprises. I'm down with good surprises. But what I'm not down with is being surprised by something you can count on, and especially when that surprise is something that disappoints you and hurts you. Once you learn to adjust to the rather bleak territory of what a relationship with a narcissist is, number one, it becomes a wake-up call to cultivate other healthy spaces in your life where the surprises are good ones. And number two, to stop getting so surprised and bent out of shape every single time the narcissist behaves according to formula. They're not going to change. But it reminds you to start doing the things you need to do to take care of you in these situations. And the final bit you get from this is the less you get surprised, the more you mentally train yourself that this relationship, there's not a lot of there. And for some people who are teetering on whether they're going to distance themselves, leave the relationship, distance themselves, or cut off from family, or leave a job or something like that, this might give them more of the fortitude to really think about this in a whole way. Instead of bringing all that emotional energy of surprise to the relationship, instead, they can create some distance from the indifference that comes from no longer getting surprised. So, keep that surprise for something a lot more fun, like balloons at your front door, and don't give it away to the narcissist. Let's talk about these words. What are these words I don't want you to say? This video is sort of meant to be a bit of a life hack video designed to help your mental health globally. And it's particularly useful, I'm hoping, for people in relationships with narcissistic folks. I want you to eliminate a phrase that all of us are guilty of saying, but which is not good for us. Ready? I want you to stop saying, "You make me feel blank," as in, "Oh, God, whenever you say that, you make me feel guilty." Or when you say, "When that happens," and when you say that, "you make me feel stupid," or "you make me feel angry." Stop giving away your power. Nobody has the power to make you feel. You feel. Maybe in response to them, but you feel. That phraseology, "make me feel," has a real risk of turning you into having more of a victim mindset rather than being a person who is in full self-possession of your feelings. And that's really important. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So let's play this out as a little bit of a scenario. You're having an argument with a narcissist in your life. As usual, they're either gaslighting you or manipulating you or guilting you. Your usual response might have been like, "Oh gosh, I hate when you say that. When you say that, you're making me feel guilty." No.
You're not going to say that anymore. Interestingly, the far healthier response would be, I hear you. Guess this whole situation's hard. I feel guilty right now. Or it may be that you say, yeah, I hear you. I feel a little angry right now. You might be thinking, what's the difference? The difference is this. Remember, your feelings are yours. In the case when you say, I am feeling, you're not giving them the power of having constructed your feelings. And there's a few reasons this distinction is really important. First, when you say, I am feeling guilty, I'm feeling angry, you're owning your feeling. Don't get me wrong. Even if you say, I am feeling whatever the heck you're feeling, they're still going to gaslight you. They're going to invalidate you. They're going to minimize your feelings, but they were going to do that anyhow. Now, at a minimum, at least, you're owning it. And that's a much healthier place in all of your relationships. Secondly, when you say, I am feeling, it gets you out of the victim identity or the victim mindset. If you say things like, you make me feel angry, you make me feel sad, you make me feel guilty, whatever it is, you just took on the position of someone whom things happen to. And words matter. The way we talk to ourselves shapes how we feel. And if someone else can make us feel something, we're honestly almost like victimized by that, and it gives them too much power. And that drives into point 3. Saying that you make me feel gives away your power. Now, when you say that, the narcissist recognizes that they are holding on to a trigger and the power to induce a feeling out of you, and they're going to use it. If you acknowledge that something they said, like, oh, what you just said made me feel guilty, now they have a means by which to make you feel guilty. And how lovely for that, because then that becomes a great little manipulation to get them to behave the way you want or feel the way they want you to feel. Do you really want them to have that kind of power? And trust me, and I'm going to be honest, I struggle with this all the time. I have to catch myself when I'm about to say it and close my eyes for a quick second and say, no, I feel. Or even when I talk about other people, like I'm working with clients or talking on these videos, I have to catch myself and say something like, situations like this can be associated with a wide range of feelings, including guilt or shame. And the fact is, I don't always get it right. In fact, I probably make this mistake once a day. When it comes to human relationships and communication, starting with I, when you are trying to make a point, especially about feelings, is always safe because it steers you towards empowerment and ownership of your beliefs and behaviors. Because if you fall back on the, he makes me feel guilty, my mother makes me feel guilty, all the power is in that other person. And in some ways, that means there cannot be an alternate feeling. It's as though they're setting out to cause your guilt. So if you say, I feel guilty, then you can take a minute and realize that there could also be alternate things, such as, actually, I feel angry, or I feel manipulated, or I feel ridiculous even having this conversation. You don't always have to say these things out loud, but rather what you got to remember is that there's alternate hypotheses that you can entertain by making it about an I feel. And it opens up so much more power, because when you feel guilty, that can be a dead end. You made me feel guilty. But when you entertain these alternative hypotheses, like I feel angry, that might motivate a change. Instead of feeling helpless and guilty, you might now consider setting boundaries, disengaging, holding different expectations. But saying, you make me feel, makes you just a boat without a rudder that's being buffeted by the psychological waves. Now, this is a quick fix. Don't say make me feel, and it won't always be easy, but catch your language. It's the little fixes like this that can at least give you tiny calibrations that you can try to stay sane in all kinds of relationships, and particularly in narcissistic relationships. And I just want to let you know, this community makes me happy with your support for each other. Oh, whoops. I should take ownership, and instead of saying, this YouTube channel makes me happy,
I guess I just got to say, I feel happy. I got to own it. You got to own it. These tiny little tricks of language can break us out of the mental cycles that keep us stuck in narcissistic relationships. Now, nobody makes you feel anything. You feel. And that might be due to the person in front of you. It may be the way you woke up that morning, but I feel. I feel what I feel. You did what you did. That might have affected my feeling, but ultimately, I get to be the boss of me. And more than anything, I get to be the owner, call it what you will, of my feelings. Don't let those be taken away. If you grew up in a narcissistic family, go on to other narcissistic relationships, you often grow up with that sense of this made me feel, this made me feel, this made me feel. It makes sense. You're a kid. You often feel like you're a passive recipient. You're not. As an adult, you can own it. Own it as what you feel. And don't make it about them making you feel in any other way.
So let's just do a brief review of gaslighting in general terms so we're all on the same page. It's a 5-step process. Step 1, the relationship has some sort of trust or expertise built into it. Could be a partner, it could be a new person you want to win over for some reason, it could be a family member, maybe some kind of person with expertise that you need to work with, or a boss. As a result, you are willing to believe them and trust them. Step 2, they start to steal your reality. That never happened. I never said that. Are you sure that really happened? I never got your text. I never sent that email. All of that can confuse you and leave you with lots of self-doubt. In step 3, they paint you out as having something wrong with you. You are too sensitive. You must be mentally ill. Is your memory okay? Have you been taking your medications? You need help. Your anxiety is out of control. Step 4, they keep repeating this process to the point where you become reliant on their version of reality because you have so doubted your own. You pretty much completely abandon yourself and your reality, and you become indoctrinated into the cult of them. Step 5, you have lost your sense of you and what you are and who you are, and to the world, because you just go along with everything the narcissist is doing now. It looks like you're in agreement with the narcissistic person and part of a united front. But we could add a step 6 to this, and it is something that people in narcissistic relationships do. The person in the relationship gaslights themselves. Maybe I'm too sensitive. My anxiety is probably really hard to live with. Ugh, I'm so dumb. It's amazing I get anything done. Let me double and triple and quadruple check that. My mind isn't that sharp anymore. That's what self-gaslighting looks like. Now, self-gaslighting is clearly a byproduct of being in a narcissistic relationship where you experience the gaslighting and it becomes part of your language. But we also need to be aware that there is another dynamic present in self-gaslighting, which is that it is a way to appease the narcissist. In some ways, to keep the relationship going in a way that they get to keep their power and you may avoid their rage. Self-gaslighting delivers a sense of superiority to the narcissistic person, to their sense that they are the ones who have it together and that you are the one who is the weak link in the relationship. Most people do not consciously self-gaslight for this goal. They self-gaslight because it has been done to them so many times that pretty much we kind of internalize the dynamic. But the self-gaslighting also gives a sort of secondary, benefit, if you will, of protecting a person who is in a narcissistic relationship. In a way, self-gaslighting is a way of getting ahead of the abuse. If you are already saying out loud that you are the one who is too sensitive or slow-witted or losing your mind or your memory, then other than agreeing with it, there isn't much more that the narcissist can bring to the table at that point. Perhaps it's a way for us to maintain control. If we're the ones harming ourselves, then it's a bit more controlled and predictable than when the narcissistic person does it to us. The sad part is whether we are gaslighting ourselves or the other person is gaslighting us, it is harming us. It is shaping our sense of selves and our identity. So the irony of self-gaslighting is that the trap becomes a tactic. The trap is that you are talking about yourself in a way that actually holds you back, that impedes healing and growth. The tactic is that by self-gaslighting, you may be dialing down the amount of abuse that is happening in the relationship because you are getting ahead of them and gaslighting yourself before they can gaslight you. For many people stuck in narcissistic relationships, the sense of helplessness and powerlessness and just generally feeling out of control of what is happening to them is such an overwhelming feeling. Self-gaslighting, sadly, may just create something called congruence in the relationship. That basically means that for better or worse, the pieces fit. You're doubting yourself, they're doubting you. It sort of knocks the dissonance out of place. And when the pieces fit, even when it harms us, it also releases some tension. But while self-gaslighting is a sort of workaround, it is a deeply unhealthy one, and echoes of self-gaslighting can persist for a lifetime. The challenge is to catch it and correct it. But while you are in the narcissistic relationship, it's really very difficult because even if you find a way to dial down the self-gaslighting, the narcissist is there making sure that you get gaslighted one way or another. Like I said, it's a trap that's a tactic that goes back to being a trap. Now, listen, I've said it over and over again, right? My stance is clear. There's no point in calling them out. They aren't listening. And in general, calling them out is far more likely to generate more harm than any growth. So unless you love yourself some conflict and rage, and some of you may enjoy that, then calling them out is never a good idea. In fact, calling them out only just gives you more confirmation of how unhealthy these relationship cycles are and may be so triggering that it is simply not good for your health. So let's start at the top. Here's a first thing alternative to calling out a narcissist. Don't call them out. It's really that simple. Do not call them out. It would save you a world of grief and hurt if you did not. You aren't turning to them for confirmation. They aren't going to change, so don't do it. If you suspect that narcissistic patterns are in play in your relationships, then you simply have bigger decisions to make. Put your time there. Ask yourself, do I stay and set boundaries and not engage? If I leave, what does that look like? But some grand showdown of telling them, there's no win there, and that's not a good idea. A second alternative, put your energy into actually really understanding what this pattern is about, not in calling them out. An issue that often arises is that people read books or blogs or watch videos on channels such as this, and then will find themselves saying, aha, now I get it. Just like maybe that magic moment when somebody finally sort of masters algebra or how to play the violin. And then you want to take that newfound knowledge and want to march over to that narcissist and say, aha, I have your number. I see you. Instead, it's far better for you to just simply focus on understanding the pattern, and then you can use that information to guide your decision making, not just in this relationship, but in others, and turn what felt like chaos into a predictable, albeit still painful situation, and make more informed choices. Your third alternative is gray rock. It's a thing, and it works. Gray rocking is a form of disengagement, not taking their bait, not having the usual invalidating conversations, not sharing your achievements with them so they can minimize them, not sharing your pain with them so they can diminish you further by not having any empathy, just sticking to superficial topics such as the weather or the new purple flowers in the neighbor's garden. No, I get it. When you gray rock, it's not a deep relationship, but the fact is it never was. And the gray rocking, they have a little ramp up at the beginning when you do it, but then over time it may help with the rage. Gray rocking means that you don't go deep. Someone recently suggested to me the idea of another level, sort of level up from gray rocking. She suggested calling it firewalling. She's a tech person. And we sort of laid out firewalling as, again, this level up from gray rocking, the concept of firewalling, not letting important or sensitive information in or out, but otherwise interacting normally. It's like a boundary that keeps your most intimate knowledge within you, but you can share other information safely. Fourth alternative is have some other sounding boards or sources of support. This can be therapy, close friends who get it, those friends of yours who sneer and say, you shouldn't say narcissist, that's not nice, you're not a doctor. Put them in the firewall pile. You can't have this conversation with them. You can turn to online support groups that are well run or other social groups where you can just be you. Having those spaces can be game changers for you and make it less likely that you make the mistake of calling out the narcissist and instead just vent in a space where you are safe and validated. Fifth is radical acceptance. Radical acceptance means knowing that this won't change. This or these are the limits of this relationship and this person, and it also means knowing that calling this out is pointless. This falls in, radical acceptance falls in with the many other techniques I have shared, including managing realistic expectations, setting boundaries, not defending, not engaging, not explaining, and not personalizing. But as part of this, it's also recognizing via radical acceptance that calling this out, calling a narcissist out, is pointless and potentially harmful. And sixth is distraction. Do something else. You feel like calling them out? I don't care if you go and pick up some yarn and start to crochet, write the great American novel, take a walk, bake a cake, go to the garden, or binge watch a show for the 10th time. Do something else. And the moment you want to call them out, that feeling, it may pass. I gotta say, watching a show or a movie is particularly useful because it can sometimes change your disposition or your perspective depending on what the show is about. And just that little change in focus and perspective may pull you back from wanting to do it and sort of letting that desire to call them out pass. I'm going to say this for the third time in this series. All of you are as free to do as you wish. We have that option. And to know that all choices carry a responsibility. If their ragey word salad mess is a price of admission to speak your truth, then you do you. You do what feels right. But you go in thinking, if you do go in thinking there could be real change and real contrition from them, then don't do it. And keep in mind that there are other people who get affected by their rage. Children, co-workers, other observers. So please be mindful of those impacts before you start calling them out and their rage overtakes everyone. For those of you with traumatic histories, narcissistic rage is not only triggering, it's destabilizing. It can result in setbacks in functioning and in ramp-ups in other mental health symptoms. The narcissist is going to remain a one-person wrecking crew. Please protect yourself, as their rage and their manipulation can literally make you sick, both mentally and physically. And not calling them out is not enabling. A lot of people say, if I don't call them out, then I'm part of the problem. They're already enabled. And you calling them out in a strange way enables them more, because it means they can just go on yet another one of their ragers that they use to release tension. They aren't going to change. And more meaningful consequences that may range from legal, criminal, financial, employment, or social penalties or remedies are probably not going to happen on your watch. Consequences that could result in a loss of their power, their privilege, their resource, and their social standing are typically all that will ever get through to them. And it very rarely happens in this world. The world enables them. Our laws enable them. It's not just you. In narcissistic relationships, we strive. We have to strive for our own self-preservation and protection. And we need to try to heed those red flags early and often. So there are alternatives to calling them out. There's no point. It is a pointless endeavor. These are 6 things you can do instead. Keep them at ready access and recognize that at those times you want to say, do you recognize what a raging narcissist you are? I don't know. Go turn on that Netflix. Thanks again.